friends, I think we had a very fruitful consideration of the conditions we are facing in this country. We had a very committed, emotionally nuanced speech from Honorable Justice Hegde. We had an economic rational analysis from Professor Prabhat Patnaik. We had also the remedies for corruption being discussed by Annapurna, and Gopi Krishnan gave us an analysis of the corporate sector and what's happening there. I would not like to summarize their arguments. They have all been very effectively put across to us and have contributed to our general understanding of the problem. I would only like to bring to your notice 3 or 4 important dimensions of the globalization, neoliberalization, and related political and social issues. I have written a fairly long essay, which is there in your folder, and I don't think I should suggest that you read it, because that may not be something very wise, but those of you are interested in the manner in which I look at this, I suggest that that may be referred to. But I will neither read that essay here nor summarize the argument in that essay. Instead, I want to raise some issues which I consider to be fundamental in the debate that is going on in our society. I think the question Prabhat Patnaik raised at what is corruption, possibly that is a fundamental issue. When we talk about corruption, the concept that we use in recognizing corruption is important. Is corruption a political issue? Is corruption a political problem? In deciding the politics of this country through political power in this country, through election, corruption has never been an influential factor, completely influential factor. The only election in which corruption became an issue and influenced the result of that election was that of Rajiv Gandhi, when VP Singh had raised the issue of corruption. Otherwise, in deciding the destiny of a political decision, corruption has not been a decisive factor. I'm not saying that it could not be a decisive factor, but it could be, but it has not been so. But then what is corruption? Quite a lot of people in our country have been talking about as politics as the center, as the root of corruption. and that corruption resides in this. Corruption is as a part of this. But I want to put across to you that politics is involved undoubtedly, but corruption is also, and more importantly to my mind, a social phenomenon, is a moral issue. When corruption is indulged in, there has been talk about politics being bad, politicians being bad, and all that is happening in this country is because of politics and politicians, and undermine the importance of politics. Politics may have, Indian politics and politicians and political parties may have thousands of weaknesses. We all know that. But I'm rather skeptical about, in a democracy, politics being undermined in this fashion, and a solution being put forward that non-politics, the rejection of politics, is the solution. I want to raise a counter question in that. How about the civil society? Whose name all of us and all the leaders speak about. Is civil society, is it corrupt? Here, I think several times it was, we talked about Ambani's. Is having, or two people living in a house in a country like India where 80% people or 60 to 70% people live in huts, is that corruption? Isn't it corruption? Or a person, an advocate, charges 50 lakhs of rupees for appearing in a case for 2 hours. Is it corruption? Or isn't it corruption? So I do not think that the expression of corruption in a country can really be divorced from a morality that we expect in a democracy. So when we talk about the civil society and the championing of civil society, I think civil society itself has got to be subjected to, consideration, to critique in our society. When I say this, I have in my mind that the way it is posed, the question that is posed, who is supreme? Is Parliament supreme or people supreme? That's something which is happening all over the country. I think it's a very dangerous counterposition. Parliament is supreme according to the representative system that we have. But that representative parliament is obviously elected, brought into being by people. And therefore people are. But then, if people are supreme, parliament is people. I think there is this, one has to, in India today we have to have a very serious discussion, varied discussion about the representative system. I have great criticism of the representative system because 50%, the question of majority, a fairly majority of members of the parliament may not have a majority. Or a party which is going to leads the country may not have a majority. But yet at the same time, the representative system is one in which in democracy we think about the representation of the people. And therefore this counterposition between who is supreme. Now when we ask the question who is supreme, and if people, 1,000 people, 1 lakh people or 5 lakhs people being mobilized in a public place and they represent the people, I think it's a very doubtful proposition. On what basis do they represent the people of this country? There is some way by which representation is established. So the claim of being a civil society, I think, is very problematic outside a given structure of representation in the country, in a democracy. This, to my mind, is central. And I have been arguing that, unless you have an accepted form of representation of the people, whatever the numbers are who claim to represent the civil society cannot really represent the civil society or the democratic representation of the people. In fact, one of the Malayalam newspapers, Malayalam journals published from Ernakulam, said, the title of the essay in that was Anna Hazareyum K.N. Panicker. And then it said that I am being critical of this representation because Anna Hazare did not recognize me as the representative of civil society. That, I think, precisely is the question. That precisely is the question. How do you establish this representation? So, to me it appears that when we think in terms of politics and political representation, however much our representative institutions are weak, it is necessary to work through a representative institution. And that is what Indian Parliament is. So in terms of finding a solution for corruption which affects the common man, the only institution in this country in which the common man can express his opinion cannot be sidestepped. So I feel that in the discussion that is going on, and now it is accepted, accepted that, well, 5 people, 10 people can represent the civil society if they have the right connection with the government. And that connection is important. I want to say something which is not being said in this country, but it's important that we raise this question. How is it that the Indian state decided to accept 5 people to draft a bill? On what basis? Anna Hazare also only had to sit on a dharna for 5 days, a fast for 5 days, and the Indian state accepted. And a committee was established. How is that? And this is against what the Indian state had done before. Think about Potti Sriramalu. He went on a fast, nobody bothered, he died. Then only the state was moved, state institutions were moved. Sharmila from Northeast has been on hunger strike for the last 10, 12 years. Nobody bothers. Nobody conducted anything. So why is it that the state was moved immediately and some sort of an agreement happened? This is because there is a convergence of interest of what the civil society representatives are saying and the state is wanting. There is a convergence of interest. And that is because, against what we believe, I do not believe that Lokpal bill is going to end corruption. Because if you want to end corruption, you have to empower the people. Now, unless you empower the people, you cannot stop corruption at all. And there is nothing in the bill or the way in which was discussed in which common man is empowered. And therefore, it is in a way convenient. It is convenient for both sides to accept this corruption. I'm not questioning the sincerity of anyone, but I'm saying the process is this, that it becomes convenient for both. And then what is this happening? And this scenario is happening in a situation in which, as it was pointed out here, major changes are taking place as far as the economic life is concerned. But we talk about, all the influence that's happening is coming to our society. And economic imperatives, political imperatives, etc. I want to draw your attention to two other aspects of what is happening to India, which is in a way related to these movements, the new movements also taking place in the country. One is for the capital that is coming to India and trying to influence the policy, what are the cultural implications? What are the intellectual implications? What are the major social implications? Something is on the anvil, which we read about in the newspapers today. If the FDI, foreign direct investment coming in the sale of daily articles, the big corporations coming to sell in India the articles of daily use. I'm using the word daily use purposely because the coming of these forces into India may have obviously economic implications, but I feel that it has much greater cultural implications. And if that happens, that our possibility of our cultural life is being influenced by this, I think we will have a different sensitivity than what is existing today, which is already happening. Which is already happening without our really being reacting to it. I think that this is a time in which unprecedented change is taking place in our cultural life. Such change had not even taken place in Europe during the Industrial Revolution. This is, very major changes. The importance of that is not only it is taking place and we are all falling into it, but we are participants in it. We push forward those changes, and particularly the middle class in India is part of these changes. And therefore, a major cultural change is taking place because of these new forces coming in, new powers coming in, and this is very closely linked with what's happening in the field of education. I will not go into the details of it except by saying that if we very seriously think about the implications of the foreign universities possibly coming to India, which is happening, the decision has already been taken. I think the intellectual scenario in India is going to be affected by this, and much more importantly, people talk in terms of education alone. I feel it has got a major cultural implication. And therefore, the globalization, which is not universalization, but something which is being brought to influence the way that we think, this educational enterprise is going to be extremely important. Read with that what appeared in newspaper yesterday in the pharmaceutical area, and the new companies coming, the new products coming, etc. The implication of that in the health sector. So therefore, the question to my mind in a discussion like this, how do we locate the effort to prevent corruption? Prevent corruption in our country. Justice Hegde used an interesting word. It's there in the bill. And that is, instead of prevention, earlier it was prevention, but now in some of these bills, these bills have undergone several incarnations, and the word used is contain corruption. Containing corruption and preventing corruption are two different things, entirely different things. So if you have come to a position that what the state would like to do is to contain corruption, I think as a part of containing, it will as much be present as a part of the system. So as Prabhat Patnaik quite rightly pointed out, are we able to have a systemic change? And any attempt to, stop corruption, unless you are also able to have systemic change, is not going to be effective at all, which means that we have to start from the roots. We have to start from the beginning. And that beginning is, well, how independent are we going to be? How free we are going to be in all these matters. I want to end by just a remark about Anna Hazare, which I didn't want to do it, but I just wanted to make this. I mean, Anna Hazare, a highly respected person, I also highly respect, etc., and is seen as, a Gandhian and all that. But I think in the process of this, one should perhaps inquire how independent and free a movement like this would be. As it is, you can see, if you make a social analysis of this movement, you will see the most powerful controlling factor in this movement is that of the Hindu right wing. And the question therefore is, would movement like this, which decry the parliament, which decry democratic politics, would such movement open the way for the resurgence of right wing in this country? I think that's the question which perhaps bothers me much more than any others. Thank you very much.